My name is Kris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org. And this is Great Work Launchpad, Ep.3. Today is April 30th, 2025, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Same bat time, same bat channel as I've been doing for, past 2 months. Streaming this live Great Work Launchpad in between presentation on law of freedom. So today, if anyone wants to join in and join in the roundtable talking about the subject of the episode, where was it? Episode 3, Barriers to Initiation. Facing the mirror, which is the shadow work. Face the mirror. Face the darkness inside, the demons, the horror, and also the beauty and the light, not just the dark. The truth and the falsity, within and without. I want to mention I made a Telegram group. There's Telegram. And the goal of the Telegram group is if people are looking for help on how to get started, asking questions on how to get started in the great work, or maybe you want, you don't know what to do to start. Well, I could give you a homework assignment and start it off with something easy like just writing, as I mentioned in I think it was the Great Work Launchpad episode 1 or something like that. So if anyone wants to come by on the Telegram, and maybe other people will join, and they could offer their insights and tips on to people as well. But I just decided to create it as rather than tell people, go to my site and contact me. I think people prefer a more interactive way of communicating, and I guess Telegram's the new hot thing, and rather than Facebook or something. Hey Brandon, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going? Doing good.
All right. So, So tonight's episode is brought to you by Pfizer. No, I'm kidding. So the goal of tonight's episode is to continue with the initiation. I was trying to figure out what to do, and we talked about awakening, talked about initiation, how we got initiated into it. And this one is to, help others get initiated into starting to create the content by facing themselves first, doing that inner work, and developing the truer, higher, realer aspect of themselves. They're to better themselves in whatever ways they may feel they are lacking to start the work as well, but in more alignment with truth, or learning more, to have more of a knowledge base before you go talking about something that you don't really know much about. And the topics, I got quite a bit here that we could talk about. Maybe go into a second episode, depending on how in depth we go into it. And I guess the first we can talk about is self-love, self-respect, how they relate to each other. So I'll let you start off, Brandon, if you got something to say about that, or else I'll start yapping away.
Sure. Just writing down something real quick in case I forget it. How we talked about that.
Hell yeah. Gotta write that
Yeah,
shit down, or else it's
yep,
gone into the memory hole of oblivion, man. That's
yeah,
out.
for real. Yeah, self love and self respect, and that's one of the things that has to be understood when it comes to doing this kind of work because it is aspect of self love. That you are sacrificing and contributing to the message of freedom. And it's one of those harder things to try to develop. It was for me something that I developed, I guess you can say, hell, later on in my hell adulthood. But around it was being around strong feminine presence that kind of helped me develop some of those you know aspects. And like the self-care part is one thing that I've kind of taken in, because in doing this kind of work, like when I first started, it was kind of more rigid. Then I realized, like, hey, if I'm going to be in this environment trying to create, then I need to kind of tailor that environment toward, like toward my liking. That way at least can get more, focus and kind of like feel more, like in a sense, and um, learning how to manage the time was another one of the toughest things for me, because I can just get so like so focused on a presentation, or like on the specific video, that you kind of lose sight of things in the real world. And like you forget to eat, like you're just in front of the computer all day. You don't get to you forget to take those breaks. And those were some things that just had to be learned. But like the biggest thing was truly still putting time aside for me to engage in time, like with myself, and not being so overly focused and trying to create, because I think that's one thing that a lot of people get fixated on, especially when you just join, like you have all this energy and you kind of like just want to start creating, you want to just kind of start putting things out there. And it's easy to get lost in the whole numbers, stuff like that, and you get focused on quantity and not quality. And just kind of get lost in just the creation, to where you start to neglect your own self, and you start to neglect your own work, because there's still work that needs to be done as far as the inner work, as you are putting this information out there. And it's so easy to get just lost in putting stuff out there, and you neglect the true inner work. And that's where I think a lot of the self love and the self care is still finding time to set aside for you to still get whatever work done, heal upon yourself. And it's always been a kind of tough thing, a tough balance. But when I talked about putting myself in that hell environment, you have to be able to find out what calms you down, what brings you back down to center, what brings you back down to homeostasis, and explore that. Like there is a modicum of self-realization. You kind of need to know yourself. You need to know what agitates you. You need to know what traumas you still need to be working on. And like all that is going to be pulled out of you, like in a sense, because I think a lot of people like start too early, and they don't do, like the inner work, and they don't last long, you know, and they'll disappear, or whatever. But it's this long progression, this long tedious progression, like this journey, how this process that constantly has to be refined. But it all starts with the self love and the self respect, because truly, like, until you start pulling out this work, then that's really when you truly start to help develop that self-love and that self-respect, because you really start to see truly what all the great teachers were talking about, and you get to get on the battlefield and show how that you truly do care. And it's not just care for yourself, but care for truth, care for freedom, and respect for truth, respect for freedom, and doing the right thing.
Yeah, right on. I'll touch on some things that you talked about. Um, the getting lost in the activity. For me, it doesn't happen that much with the great work. Um, but when I would do like coding stuff on my own and not for work that I've done in the past, there, I would just get so focused, and then yeah, I'm in that just keep going. Okay, what's the next problem? Because in coding, that's where you're trying to make something work, and then it's like, why
Yeah.
doesn't this work? Why doesn't this work? And you get so focused and determined to like try to find the solution. And then it's like time goes by, you forget to eat, you need to pee, but you weren't going to pee, and you just like time to go to bed, but you're like 2 hours over your bedtime, and yeah. But I know what that feels like, but I never had it for like getting focused in like making a presentation or writing something out, because it wasn't like I guess it wasn't a problem I'm trying to solve, or it's like I don't know, you get like obsessed over the problem and trying to find a solution for it because we know the solution. And
Yep.
yeah, so it was different for me. I've had that, but not for the great work. Yeah, I can definitely see how you get like in the zone and focused and just drop everything else, and your focus and attention doesn't go anywhere.
Hell, I did that on Sunday. I ran into a problem. It was a simple step because I have a piece of technology. It's a printer, scans documents. But because it was sent from the manufacturer, it's like it's like an office, not necessarily a personal, printer or scanner. So they sent it with all of this like backdoor stuff that you had to go in and unlock. And I'm trying to, scan a document to sign, and it took me 3 hours to figure it out. But I was just so focused, and like I wanted to get it done because it was something important, and I didn't eat. Like I wanted to get it done. It took me 3 hours, and it was something so simple because the manufacturer sent it with all these, safety protocols. They make stuff so hard for the average consumer. But yeah, it took me 3 hours just to figure it out. But I finally got it done.
Nice.
But yeah,
Well, you got to make it hard so that you need an expert to come do it for you. Can't make things too simple. We need to keep that cash flow going around.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, not just make things simple and hey, do this. It's super simple. Not make it complicated. So people have to
Oh
pay
yeah,
someone else.
yep,
Yeah, another thing you mentioned was quality over quantity, and that is important. Um, it's not just about just creating content. That's not the goal. It's the
yep.
type of content that is creating. So I mentioned it. I think it was last week in the Law of Freedom, in the discussion we had with Theo, and it's as Passio states, he calls it formal content. You got to formalize it. You have a logical progression, so it doesn't have to be on video. But if you're going to do like a podcast, you have to have an outline or something of knowing where you're going to go, so your thoughts flow more smoothly, and there's like a common thread to follow to tie things together. And so you should do that beforehand rather than go off the cuff and just like talk about this, and then you're on like another tangent, and then that brings you to another tangent, and then you don't remember what the original thing you were talking about, which does happen in conversations. But if you have like an outline, like I did, like I posted in the YouTube link here, there's like at least you have something to draw you back to. And certainly if you're writing something, you don't have that problem. You can just write and then come back and edit it, and like, okay, that's not really relevant, and you have a lot more time, and it's a lot less pressure. That's why I'd recommend people, if you don't know where to start with writing. I wasn't a very good writer, and I got better by doing it. So it might be one of the things we can talk about in maybe in the next episode of this one, on things that are holding people back, that they don't think they're good enough at, writing. Well, I don't know how to write. Well, if you start trying to write, then I can guarantee you'll get better at it. And if you don't try,
Yeah.
well, if you don't try, you're not going to go anywhere. I forget. There's like an aphorism about trying I think it was related to belief. If you believe you can, and if you believe you can't, well, you can't. So it's you got to believe in yourself, have faith, trust, and loyalty to yourself, to even give yourself the opportunity to move forward and try something and work at it, because it's not something you're just like innately born with, the gift of gab, or comfortable in talking on camera or anything. It's things that get developed over time, and you get more
Yep.
comfortable and you build the confidence.
Yep. And just to add, I learned as I started doing this work that writing is a good outlet for me, especially when I'm very angry. It just like it's a way for me to take that emotion
Yeah, cathartic.
and yeah, yeah, and when I write it down, or even like when I'm typing it, how sometimes like I've learned it, like it'll de-stress me. So yeah, that's something that I would like to explore, later and maybe talk about, because I think there are many other people, because journaling has always been a good way, for people, to kind of, help express themselves and kind of a cathartic means. So yeah.
Certainly relates to facing yourself, as journaling is a use. I've never gotten into it, but I know it's a good like therapeutic tool. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the shadow work and facing yourself in the mirror. Is well, you gotta that's what introspection and self-reflection is about. It's all about going inward, and that process needs to be engaged in, so that you can work on yourself and develop yourself and become a better person in whatever qualities or aspects related to truth, or certain aspects that you find are lacking. These things can be developed. We're not programmed by the nature of how we're born, and we only have certain skills or propensities. And of course, we can have more innate aptitudes or capacities that are like inborn qualities, you could say. But I'm pretty confident that nearly everything can be developed. It just takes, as you mentioned, which was another point that I wrote here, and something that I write myself emails as notes so that I can keep track of them too. And one of the topics that I thought we could talk about one time and go more in depth in is that persistence, and that determination, and that dedication. So here we're talking about it, not even in terms of doing the great work of trying to end evil or slavery and get everyone on the same page towards that goal. We're just talking about it in terms of some skills or qualities that exist as potentials within human beings that you can develop within yourself. And it just takes that dedication and determination and persistence and not giving up. And all of that requires putting in the time and the attention. You got to pay attention. If you're going to learn something you don't already know it, well, you got to pay attention to other sources of information. Or you could maybe purely learn it on your own by trial and error, by the effort of trying something and seeing how it turns out, and then analyzing it and seeing how you could do it better. And certainly learning from people who already know how to do it, and potentially put that information out. That's like launching you forward a lot better, because they're already going to give you tips that you don't have to learn through doing it wrong 20 ways to learn the right way of doing it. It can springboard you and help you along the way. And so we can get back to self-respect. And so we're talking about facing that mirror, facing yourself in the mirror, shadow work, and this is going to help you get initiated into the great work. And that's like the outer great work, and the inner great work You can look at it as lesser, microcosmic, macrocosmic, the whole tarot symbolism and all that, joined with the Kabbalistic tree of life. There's a lot people can learn from that. But that self-respect is what we're talking about, and as has been broken down by many people, self, so you, and respect. Well, respect is re-spectare, and re is again, and spectare is to look at. So to look at again. So you could look at other people again. And that's not normally how people use the term respect. But even in how they use the term respect, the etymological definition can apply. I found usually 90% of the time, someone could say, "Oh, you're not respecting me," and you're like, "Actually, I am. I am looking at you again, and this is what I'm seeing, and you just don't want to hear it." A lot of times people say, "Oh, you're not respecting me," but they're like, because they don't like what you say, so you're not showing me the due respect. But you can say, well, respect is to look at again, and what I'm doing is actually looking at you again, and I'm
Right.
seeing this aspect that is unfavorable, that you don't even respect about yourself. Not in the terms that they're thinking of respect, but in terms of they're not looking at themselves. So they're not doing the self-respect. So you can look at them and they're not looking at themselves in the same way. So then you bring that contrast up, and then they get all offended and insulted and say, "Oh, you're not respecting me." But all I'm just telling you is you could say how you're behaving. You're behaving this way. So I am respecting you, but not in the way that you think it means. Is just don't tell me things I don't want to hear. Don't be mean to me, or
Right.
don't
Yeah.
say harsh
Yeah.
truths.
Yeah. They
And
don't want to hear
that's,
the truth. Yep.
yeah, and that's one of the things in the inner work. You have to embrace those hard truths. Um, yeah, I've gone into that in my article and little presentation on truth is love. That's what the facing the mirror is. Face the mirror, look at the beauty and the horror, the light and the dark, the good and the evil within you. You got to be honest and see where you're living up to, I guess, measures of what is good and moral, and where you're
Right.
failing. And yeah, if you want to add anything on that, you can.
Yeah. Yeah. What you was just talking about, hell remind me of, getting out of the emotional, mind control, because you can't really get to any true self-respect or any true self-love, because that would be to get to the truth and look at yourself if you're in that state of, of trying to judge things with your emotions, because you'll still have those, irrationals, and still egoic, you know, attachments to where you want to, continue to do, what's considered, pleasurable or, favorable, toward you. And of course, that wouldn't be to go within yourself and, to, start doing the stuff that we're talking about. So, start to look at things objectively, and find the ways to harness those true emotions and learn to control them and don't run away from them. Because, those emotions are a good guidance, but can't be, used to try to, help, for logic. But they do have, kill its purpose, but not being in such as overly emotional, unrational state. And that's why, people don't have that self-respect, because they have that false image of themselves. People, are, you may have that, false form of respect. But until you are doing that internal work and developing that and aligning your thoughts and your emotions and actions, then that's when true self-respect and true self-care is going to, help be, help develop. Because earlier I heard you had talked about, or you mentioned barriers, stuff that's preventing, individuals from getting involved. And, there's a lot of barriers too. But that's one of them. The whole egoic, kind of attachments, the whole overly emotional, irrational self, and then two, the belief structures that we still want to hold on to and that are still ingrained, that is preventing us from, true self love and true self respect. Definitely those, have belief structures and those wrong worldviews that have been implanted. So, you really have to start to chip away at that, because to try to, have those false foundations and, try to, you know, build on top of that is going to lead to more contradiction and more of a problem. So I think all this kind of, is entangled, with what, how you are saying, and how in order to do this, how this work, it's a simultaneous work, that we're going to keep stressing on the inner work too, and doing the great work, to try to educate and end slavery. And then too, of course, you're always going to have that fear aspect, that, that's always going to be there. And I could talk about some of my own personal fears and, barriers that I had to overcome to get to, that true self love and true, self respect. And it wasn't easy, man. It took time, and I'm still working on it. Yeah, I admit, nowhere near where I want to be, but it's a it's a long haul, and people really need to understand this. Like, this is something that's not going to happen overnight, and I always try to make that clear to people. People want the shortcuts. People want the easy route. Like, 'cause that's why there's not many people doing this.
Absolutely. Yeah. On that last point of not many people doing it, exactly. They want the shortcut. Everyone's trying to, that's why they fall for get rich quick schemes and ads on YouTube and all these like self help gurus and all this stuff. They just want, that I'm gonna say, like, they want someone to take them by the hand and then lead them to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow or something.
Yeah,
Um, and there's an aspect of that is good in terms of, excuse me, in terms of, you learn from others. So yeah, you're being led by someone else that you're following for their information and trying to learn, but there's the negative aspect of like literally being spoon fed everything, and you're not trying to go out and see, think maybe in, introspect or think of things yourself, or go out and see, what other teachers there are that could be talking about similar things. You're just waiting for that one person to tell you
yeah,
everything about whatever you're trying to learn about. It's the golden age. We're gonna ascend to a second planet, to Earth, and there's gonna be a bifurcation and all this stupid shit of these people
yeah.
pretending that
Ascension
they're
in the
experts.
5D
Oh,
consciousness.
five,
Yeah,
5D. That's
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's so 2000. We're up to the 6D now or something.
Oh, 6D. Oh man.
I don't know.
Hey, it all sounds good on paper, man. Like it sounds good. It's good for clicks, but
Yeah,
like there's never any mention of morality. Like
no,
never,
it's all
none.
it's all. I've talked about it in my earlier work. It's the people just want. It's the pleasure trap, in the sense that they just want to feel good, that they have like,
Yeah,
and it ties into exactly what you were saying. It's the shortcut, the easy way out. You don't have to do work. You're, just believe that you're spiritual because you meditate or you do this or that, and you don't have to do any work. And don't worry, there's no work to do to fix the earth, because you're going off with the in the rapture. You're going to be
yeah,
raptured and you're going to go to
yeah,
heaven, and so don't worry about it. And everyone else, well, they're going to go to hell, or they're going to be on the second earth, and or you're going to the second one and they're going to be on the crap one, and
yeah.
everything's cool, don't worry about it, and
There's
listen to
always
me.
this split. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like there's always this split.
yeah,
This big split that's gonna happen.
yeah. And ultimately, it's that, well, not black pill, but stand down of, don't worry. The universe has got this, just like I talk about in my karma presentation.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
it's got it. Everything's just and ordered and fair. You don't have to do anything, and it's all gonna work itself out. And don't worry about it. And keep listening to me. Like, subscribe, and follow, and all that stuff. And don't forget to donate. And
Yeah.
God, if you don't donate, I can't keep providing you with this feel good
Yeah.
information that makes you feel so special about yourself and so
Make sure you
good.
buy your energy crystals. Yeah,
Yeah,
buy your energy crystals too.
yeah. You got to go to my store and buy my products. Boy, and yeah. So that was good. Good thing to mention about because this is part of what holds people back, and they think it's the opposite. They think that they're like evolving in consciousness, and they're not. This is it's externalizing your power into something else coming to your rescue, whether it's a Jesus, a God, or whatever this aliens or a splitting dimensions or whatever the hell that shit is, or 5D or who knows what. Anyways, all that shit is, hey, maybe it's gonna happen, okay?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe,
I don't know.
but until it does, then we can't, just sit back cheerleading. Like there has to be some initiation. And you know, I was thinking because and this is kind of on a side note, but kind of talking about the same thing. I was thinking about that that 1980s Nicholas Shrek um um interview he had did with like Tom Wolf, like some Nazi. And like when he was explaining, like he was like, we don't want everyone to join us. He was like, there's only a small percent of the human race, who has a will, who like
It's the
who's
chosen
capable.
one bullshit
cr-
again.
Right, but like now I'm starting to see what he's saying, because there's like that's what he was saying, like the like people who just have a will, like who are willing to act. And then I'm looking at it, he's talking about it from his small numbers. There are billions of people on the planet, so you think it would be more people willing to act, but it seems to be less, you know, like less people willing to act and get involved and get on the battlefield. And it's crazy because he was like, because he was right. He was saying, like not a lot of people are even capable of actually getting involved with no matter what the involvement is. People will just sit there and cheer and be spectators you know and that's the sad thing about it. Like people just want to spectate and be cheerleaders.
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah, all that is tying into that. Just like you said, it's being a spectator in the game of life. Don't get involved. Just do the basic stuff that provides you with your material comfort and survivability, and don't try to figure out how you optimize survivability in a moral way and truly cooperate with people. Because as much as you do want to cooperate, there's always that thing called the state, which is trying to get a cut of whatever you do. So
Yeah.
um, there's no maximization of the optimization of your survivability or cooperation with others, because the state's always getting involved and they want their cut so they can continue their parasitic bullshit without providing any actual value. Just control and the illusion of order and safety and security. And if you don't
Yeah.
do what they say, then you'll see how much safety and security you got.
Yeah. You introduce the middleman.
Yeah, gotta take your cut. Don't go directly to the warehouse. Buy through
Right.
me. Um, so about what you were saying, I noted some things we can talk more about. Um, I don't know. I guess that was 5-10 minutes ago that you mentioned these things, but I wrote them down. So about the emotion and the ego, And that's again, you're mentioning that's part of those barriers to the initiation, because all the stuff that's blocking you from, engaging in that aspect of stop lying to yourself and stop dreaming and fantasizing that the world is a different way than it actually is. The emotions and the ego get in the way, because that's where the defensiveness comes up. And that's where what I was talking about with respect, when you see people, when you're actually looking back at them and you see things that they don't want to see about themselves and they don't want to hear it, and then when they hear it, they get all insulted and offended. And one of my sayings that I came up with like 10, 11 years ago that I like is related to this whole judgment thing. And don't judge. It's you judge, insult, and offend yourself by your own actions. And all someone has to do is describe your actions and properly characterize them, define them. And all they're doing is bringing that to light, because you do not have the light shining. Your awareness is not on that. So you're still living in darkness about that quality of yourself, hence the shadow work, because it's in the darkness. The shadow is in the darkness. It's part of you that follows you, but it's in the dark. It's not in the light. And this is why you have to face yourself, because these aspects are things that you're not aware of yourself, that you think are just totally fine, but other people can explain it to you and see how it's detrimental to your stated goals of what you say you want. And even then, people just don't want to hear it, because it's that ego defensiveness and the emotions coming up that just totally block, as you mentioned, objectivity. And that's something else that I termed in my earlier work, I termed it as objective detachment, because part of that ego and emotion, that ego defensiveness, is when we all have as I refer to it, as an ego personality identity construct. So our identity is formulated through when we're born, and we formulate an identity. Everything that happens around us has an influence upon us. So other people, information, things we see, and that can imprint and influence our identity. We emulate other things, we copy, we idolize, and those all become part of our identity, how we see ourselves, and how we see ourselves in relation to the world, and how we see the world. So we could see the world in false ways and identify with it. Then we become attached to those things we identify, because we see it as an aspect of us. There's a similarity, a likeness between that thing and ourselves. So people even become defensive when you attack or accurately portray something as negative or wrong or immoral in
Yep.
the world. You're not even talking about themselves, but because they even identify with it, and they've built their self-view on that false worldview, or it could be accurate if I guess it's not accurate because they don't see it as actually false, and in order to detach from it and reconstruct themselves as a phoenix reborn in the fire, that alchemical process. And this is what this inner work is all about. So they're defensive about the thing you're talking about, their political party or their country, or I don't know, a brand of whatever brand or anything. It could be anything, but something outside of themselves that they identify with, and they won't let go of it. So they're attached to that. And this process of objective detachment is not being engaged in, because they're not saying, okay, hold on, let me let go of myself, look at it from outside and see, oh, okay, yeah, that's true. And then come back in and be like, okay, yeah, I should change myself in whatever way, because, well, that thing is negative and I shouldn't identify with it or be in likeness of it, or want it to be in my life, or want it to remain, such as the government or many, many other things. And yeah, so all this stuff of when you're defensive about things that relate to you or that you identify with, that you're attached to, that's preventing you from seeing yourself honestly. Hence, one of the occult maxims of initiation is to thine own self be true. Be honest with yourself. Stop lying to yourself. And another thing that you mentioned was the importance of listening to your emotions. So I'll just bring this up here. And this one's an early one that, anyways, I'll just leave it up. I don't know. I'd have to rearrange the video, so I'll just, people can go look into this. Here, call it perception of reality. I think this one's from reality processing presentation. And I just wanted to mention the middle part where, there's a conflict, there's a contradiction between reality and your desires, or how you see yourself and the new information coming in. So then you can either question it and doubt yourselves, and have curiosity to go look at the veracity of that new information that's coming from someone or something that's creating that conflict or contradiction within you. So either you say yes or no, and if you don't, then you can go in that cognitive dissonance process. And if you do, then you engage in that critical thinking, imagination, introspection, and reflection. And the part that I wanted to relate this is at the beginning, that bubble on the right is when you have that conflict and contradiction. Well, that's going to produce these emotional cues, as Brendan mentioned, and that's, I mentioned a few here. You have anxiety or guilt or shame or anger or embarrassment or stress, or maybe you have no cues at all. But usually there's an emotional aspect to it, and that emotional aspect to it is what needs to be paid attention to. So someone says something that makes you angry, or you get insulted or offended. Well, is it truly them saying something that's irrelevant, or like, you got a big nose, you got big ears, you got a big head, you got this or small or whatever, and then you get offended. It's like, okay, yeah, sure. It's not really relevant to anything of any real importance, so you can get offended. That's totally legitimate. But maybe they're telling you something related to what you do, your behavior, which is your defining characteristics. Because if you're not going to be defined by your behavior, then what does define you? How you look? Okay, well, that's superficial, because you can look in many different ways. So it's that. And what you do, your behavior, is a reflection of the internal domain. So that ultimately reflects upon that inner part of you that you're not seeing. So you're not even seeing your behavior, and you're also not even seeing that internal aspect that's even leading to the behavior that you need to work on. And hence, facing yourself in the mirror and becoming a truer, realer, higher, better version of yourself that you can become, if you want to open your eyes and see that darkness and that shadow within you that you could transform, rather than ignoring it because you're too attached to that current version of yourself and you don't want to let it go. You don't want to deal with your trauma from your past or whatever other reasons there are. And that keeps people stuck in the whatever limitations that they're imposing upon themselves at this point, especially when someone can bring it up to you and then you could reflect upon it because you're unaware. If you continue to ignore it, well, then that's it. It's ignorance. It's not just ignorance of the information. Even if you do accept it, there's also ignorance of doing something with it. Because to know and not to do, I don't agree that it's to not know. It's to know and not to do is to be ignorant in that aspect, because you're taking something you know, but you're not doing anything with it, so you're ignoring the application of it. And that's probably because you don't care enough either. And so all this stuff of being so attached to the current construct of who you are, and that self-defense is limiting you, and it's keeping you stuck and preventing you from growing and flowering, and that, hence the Passio's definition of love as it relates to the expressions of consciousness, and that's the unfolding, and you gain awareness of things, and that allows you to unfold and grow, as opposed to fear, which contracts and all that stuff. But we can get into more of that next week on the love and fear aspects. You want to bounce anything off that?
Yeah, just something to also think about because this was a question that I asked myself, when I started doing this. It's like, why is it that I, like want to get hell involved? I had like this deep, deep conversation, um, something that, you know, that I wanted to answer. Because I think it has to go, deeper, than just, because, someone encouraged you or, someone influenced you. Like you really have to ask yourself the deep question, why? Because I have seen some people kind of, it appears as though they get involved for the wrong reasons. It's like their ego, is still in the way and they want to get involved. They think they're going to blow up. Like you're not going to like get famous, you know, teaching people about morality. It ain't gonna happen. I can tell you it right now. So it ain't gonna happen. You're not going to get a lot of views. You're not going to, be the overnight sensation. You're not gonna go viral. I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen, but the probability of it happening is extremely, extremely low. And then too, if you just want to get on the network, you know, then it has to go beyond that. Like hell, that's a good goal to get, but that's not like the end game goal. It has to be, deeper. Um, um, yeah. So if you have like, like these egoic, means, then those have to be looked at too. Um, because we're all going to have our own, how different, egoic, attachments. So, what yours is, you have to really be honest and look at that. If you want to get, hell on whatever, or hell, let's say one of those, is there, then that's something that you can work at, something that you can, help be honest. But yeah, just something to put that out because I feel like there are some people out there, like who just try to join because they just want to get on the network because they think, like it's going to open up these doors or, like it's going to just open them up to like so many other, like different things. And, like the reality is people still don't want to hear the truth. So I hate to be the one to be the bearer of bad news, but yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because you're telling, like I was just talking about, you're telling people things in a. You're not talking about them, right? It's totally impersonal to them specifically when you're talking about these things, except it directly relates to them
Right.
because they can see how it relates to them, even though you're not talking about them because you don't fucking know them. But the information you're going to be putting out, it's going to create that contrast of how, oh, well, if this is true and I'm currently like this is my current state of being, well, I'm not matching up to that other level. And now I'm going to be mad and my ego is going to get in the way because, well, now I got to be defensive and like, fuck you, you don't know what you're talking about. The
Yeah.
morality is subjective. People don't want to, they don't want to face themselves. This is the whole point, they do not want to look at themselves in the mirror.
Right.
They
Yeah.
just do not want to do it. And so they keep themselves down because they just don't want to do it. And when you're so yeah, you're not going to be popular, like Brendan said. You know, talking about morality, um, it's just not what people want to hear. How they're failing to live up to what is moral and what is good because they lie to themselves and they're thinking, "Well, I'm a good person already." What? You're saying that this is what's actually moral and what's actually good, but I'm not like that. So then what you're saying is that I'm not moral and I'm not good. Well, how dare you? That's so insulting. You're not respecting me. So it's just, oh, well, I got to put up that wall and just, no, I'm not letting the information in. No, I'm just going to reject it and everything you say and just reflect it back at you because I'm not mature enough. I'm a little baby and I don't want to hear what you're saying. So
Yeah.
just bounce it back. It's like this big shield goes up. And it's like turn on the front deflectors or whatever on the Enterprise, and well, it bounces off. Or in Star Wars, they got the thing lasers being shooting, and they got bouncing
Right.
off. And so yeah, that's what the ego is. Is it's a big shield that prevents information from actually being reflected upon. And who knows later? Maybe the days or weeks or months or years later, it comes back into their head and they're like, oh wow, okay, it is true or something, and they can finally deal with it at some point for whatever reason. They deal with their trauma or who knows what, and so they can't unhear it, but they can fucking sure as hell ignore it for the rest of their life if that's how stubborn and calcified they are. And unfortunately, that's your reward. Hey, join in the great work, because people are gonna ignore you.
Yep.
And that's just the way it goes. Because you know, Pasio Pasio was fortunate, I guess, in 2010, and he got onto like radio networks. So then now it was like more popular back in the day because the internet was
Yeah.
starting up, and it was getting more popular. But there were still people hooked onto the old way and the internet, the radio, and things like that. So there's a lot of people in there he gained recognition from, and he was the first one talking about like all this stuff in such a coherent way in the tapestry that he laid out. So he made a huge
Yep.
impact, and I think that's what made him popular, being the first one to put it out, and also when things were smaller back then, less content creators, um, yeah, less competition. Like I guess the infosphere, and he had an in. He got into the radio aspect, which helped to propagate the message. So it really propelled him. And he's not as big as Alex Jones or David Icke, I guess, or other people, but he still has like thousands of views when he would do the live streams. So um, I don't know if it was
And
thousands at the time, but when you go look at his videos, there's like tens of thousands of views. So it still has decent popularity, and that's
yeah.
Pasio. So for the rest of us, good luck reaching that.
And the crazy thing is when I ask people, be like, "Hey, have you heard of Mark Passio's work?" And they're like, "Who?" And I'm like, "Where have you been?" Like, I'm sorry if you're not familiar with his work. I just don't consider you to be aware to what's going on in this
No,
world. Like,
absolutely.
I just don't. I think it's a travesty for someone to think that they are, hell aware, but they never, heard of Mark Passio or are at least familiar with his work. Like, I think that's like blasphemy. So that's just me.
Yeah, I agree. I view it as the same. I mentioned it on Fred's podcast once that I view that like people can talk about stuff and they think that they're aware, and if you're not aware of Mark Passio's work and you haven't gone through it, or if you're aware of his work but you haven't really gone through it, then you're not really that aware. You're not really that awake. You still got
Yeah.
a lot to learn as far as I'm concerned. Now it's possible that you learned everything that he talks about, the quality of information that he talks about on your own.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It
I
is possible.
fucking doubt it. I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
99.99999% doubt it of
Right.
everyone who hasn't heard of Passio. If you haven't gone through that information, it's like almost no chance that you've absorbed it from elsewhere.
Right. Because the way he put it out in such a simple format that any somewhat moderate, decent, capacity thinking human being should be able to understand. Because I've never heard anybody disagree with the way he's put it out from the hundreds of people who I've talked to, like face to face. So like the way he put it out, like to the world is so simple, it's so basic that anybody can understand it, and anyone could take that same method and teach it to others. Like that's what he brought to the world, and like that's what people don't understand, and like why his work is so important.
Yeah, the content and his more restrained delivery, I guess we could say, compared to his last 3 years with his explosive getting fed up with people. But I totally get it, because I look
Yep.
at it like it's fucking pathetic where we are, man.
Yeah.
I just look at things, and at work people are like, at my work it's very DEI, so like a Quebec native, so speaking English or French.
Yeah.
In my team there's very few, and there's like, I guess it's like 70% immigrants in terms of like other nationality. And so I don't really have a problem with that, but I'm just saying they hire, I don't know, I guess there's government incentives for like following the DEI or whoever, BlackRock, I forget whoever
Yeah.
created that score, and then you get like benefits and some fucking scoring mechanism. Anyways, I don't remember how, or it's ESG. Anyways, they both have this bullshit, like hire people on their qualifications, and you know, hire locally rather than. But anyways, that's beside the point. Um, my point was, I totally forget my point, but what I was talking about was, oh yeah, that people are so into voting, because here in Canada there was the recent election where
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
people hated Trudeau, and Trump made them love Trudeau's party again, because they were like, oh, it's a liberal party we're going to vote against. We're just going to keep going in that bubble, you know, that circle. We're going to, oh, this guy? Okay, we're going to go for the other party. And then we're going to go back to the other party. And then we're going to go back to the, and this is forever dance of retardation of people who don't know
Yeah.
what the fuck is going on, because they're still going to be ruled by masters, but they don't understand, because they don't even understand that that's the way of life. So they didn't like Trudeau's party, and they were like favoring the other party. But because the other party was more like favorable of Trump, and then there was that whole, we're gonna annex Canada and turn it into a 51st state bullshit. Like, okay, whatever. Fucking Trump's a fucking idiot. But people are like, I identify with my country in Canada, and now I'm all
Yeah.
offended and insulted because that's part of my identity. So now I'm gonna defend Canada. I'm gonna vote Liberal again, even though I hated them. And there's this new guy coming in, and he's the former, you know, chairman of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, and he's a big bankster. But
Yeah.
yeah, let's
He's
vote
not
for
so
him.
new.
Yeah,
Yeah. He's
he's
not
gonna
so
be
new.
better. Anyways, it's just, you look at it, and then they're proud of the voting, and it's just, you know, like, this is why I'm tying it back to Pasio and how I understand him, because it's like, we're so fucked. It's like,
Yeah.
dude,
Yeah.
we're just so fucked.
Fuck. Yeah.
And you know, it can still be turned around, but it takes people getting involved. And you know, we could just do nothing and go fucking do something else. But since we care about morality, as I explained in my 8-hour presentation on morality, that higher level of morality is the M2 of trying to end evil. And if you're not doing that, you're not being as moral as you can be. So when you care about being moral, and as Pastor referred to it as being a capital T, capital G, truly good person, well, then you have to get into the great work, because that's how you're applying your time and your energy and your attention towards that goal of ending evil. And you know, it's, people got to care more, and trying to get them to care, and you know, there's that whole aspect we can talk about more at another time. But just as it is now, it's just, government ain't going away anywhere anytime soon, for like
It's getting
centuries,
bigger.
thousands of years, and
Yeah.
things
It's
are
getting
just
bigger
gonna,
and bigger.
yeah, things are just gonna get worse, and then they're gonna get better, and then they're gonna get worse, and then they're gonna be better. You know, we're just gonna repeat the past, And it's just going to keep going up and down rather than like actually going where people think it's going and it's not going. And yeah, it's fucking sad. You know, as the comedian says in the Watchmen, it's all a big fucking joke. That's what it is. That's what we're living in. It's all a big lie. The
Yeah.
noble lie of deception for whatever false justifications of the collectivist greater good, which is how a lot of these elitist mindsets, these globalists and the controllers and all these think tanks and the trilateral group, trilateral and the Council on Foreign Relations and the RIA and Tavistock and everything, they view that they're doing what's beneficial to humanity, and who cares if it's immoral? And then it's also benefiting them, and then that's how they, so some don't give a shit, and they're just doing it for themselves, just for that power and that security of their position and survival. But some of them are actually like the do-gooder, the delusional do-gooder, where they actually think that climate change will, we gotta reduce the population of the planet because we're going to destroy the planet and destroy all humanity. So this is necessary in order to save humanity, So we got to do this,
Yep.
and all these efforts and carbon tax and Planned Parenthood and all these other things. So there's all these delusions, these erroneous thought forms that people believe in that keep them attached to falsity, and they strive for it and they defend it and they support it and they champion that effort of falsity.
Yep. Um, and you was, talking about the state, the condition. Oh man, like hell, I have to deal with it every day at work, just dealing with people. So yeah, yeah, trying to turn the ship around is, because like the average person like they have no conscious awareness of how ignorant they are. None, like zero. It would be in a negative, but then they think, they feel that they are a good person. They feel as though they're doing it right. You know, it's all based on feeling. Um, but yeah, it really is such a sad state, like literally such a sad state. But I know it's been about an hour, but one of the last things I wanted to talk about, as far as the self love and the self respect, to kind of tie it all in and wrap it back up, but having the definitive knowledge of what is right and wrong, and actually running all of this knowledge, this information through the trivium yourself. I think that has been one of the biggest improvements as far as my own, development, to truly know this stuff to the point where, I could talk about it pretty much 24/7, with anyone at any, time and place. Even if I'm in like a deep sleep, if you were to shake me up and like just violently, kind of wake me, I would still be able to talk about this stuff. Like that's how deep we need to know the difference between right and wrong, to where it becomes ingrained in your being, And yeah, I really didn't understand what Mark was saying until I actually got involved and I started to witness, a lot of the stuff, that he was saying, and not just believe him, not just believe, anyone else, but to actually go out and do the investigation myself and prove it to myself. So then, therefore, when I'm speaking, I'm actually, speaking as actual verified, information. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we should really be striving for when it comes to doing this true journey. And that's one of the biggest things I've taken from your work, is because I've caught myself, doing that. It's just, saying stuff is true when you haven't really verified it, yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we need to be conscious of. because we have to be responsible for what we say. We have to be responsible for what we think. We have to be responsible for what we feel and do. So it's embodying all of the aspects that comes with consciousness. So I'll close it on that.
Sounds good. Well, we talked about one of my points, so that's good. This was self-respect. We went in pretty well, and
Well, how many points total?
OBS Studio disconnected, reconnected. Okay, successful. Oh, I guess I had a internet hiccup or something. Yeah, so it's good. We did a good broad spectrum dissection of self-respect and related things that relate to it, and then we can do self-love next week. And that one's pretty deep too. I can talk a lot about that one.
Yeah.
Self-love and the lack of it, as in self-loathing. So that's something we can broaden and branch off in different things, and probably fill up a whole hour just on that as well. So we'll have
Yeah.
some good discussions in the following weeks, because there's a lot to talk about related to facing ourselves in the mirror. So some
Yeah.
good discussions to have.
Sweet. Yeah. All right, man. That sounds good.
Yeah. So thanks for coming by, Brendan. Appreciate it. Good discussion, and hopefully see you next week. And hey, Theo, maybe thanks for tuning in, and maybe see other people next week. And again, there's a Telegram for anyone who wants to stop by and ask questions about tips or tricks or motivation, or I don't know what to get started. And like I said, I can assign you homework. If you don't know what to do, where to start, I can give you something to do. And then if you want a place to present it, well, you can come on here on the Great Work Launchpad, and I can give you however much time, 5-10 minutes, and you want to present your topic. Well, here's a way to get involved and get started without knowing how to do everything. But
Yep.
you can put yourself out there if you want, and see how it goes. So thanks again, Brandon, and you have a good evening, and talk to you soon. Take care.
Yeah.
Peace.